Hey friends, and welcome back to another video. I'm so excited to see you guys. I hope you guys are doing well. You know what's one of my favorite snacks in the whole wide world? Cheez-Its. I love any kind of cracker or snack that has really fun little interesting shapes, and Cheez-Its are no different. As you guys know, Cheez-Its are in the shape of little squares, which is pretty cool if you ask me. That's the really cool thing about shapes, is that everything in the world, everywhere you look, is made out of shapes. I mean, our crackers sometimes are squares. I have a little pin right here that's a nice little circle. The DVDs that we really like, well, that's a rectangle right there. And even something like a piece of pizza, that's a triangle for you. That's what's so cool about shapes, is that everything is made out of them. Now, in art, shapes are incredibly important because they help us draw anything that we want. Like I said earlier, everything in the world is made out of shapes. So, if we learn what shapes make up different objects, it's a lot easier for us to draw them. Now, before we start learning how we can use shapes to draw stuff, I think we need to break down shapes just a little more. Now, in art, there are two different kinds of shapes that we talk about. There's geometric shapes and organic shapes. Now, the first one we're going to be talking about is geometric. Geometric is simply the shapes that we've been learning about since preschool. These are things like circles, squares, triangles, rectangles, diamonds, all that good stuff. Now, what makes a geometric shape not only means that it's one of the simple shapes that we've been learning forever, but it uses lots of lines, and it's very straight and neat. Now, obviously, I'm not the straightest or neatest drawer in the world, but in theory, these are very straight, very neat, and they're what we call symmetrical. They match on each side. This side of my square is going to match this side of my square, and vice versa. Everything is very orderly. It literally looks like something that we can get when we go to the toy store and we get some blocks. That is what we call a geometric shape. Now, the other kind of shapes that we talk about are not geometric shapes. These are ones that we call organic shapes. And no, they aren't shapes that you find with hipsters at a farmer's market. Organic shapes are just shapes that are a little more complex than geometric shapes. Now, these are shapes that we usually find out in the world, or it could just be very weird imaginative shapes that don't really fall into the category of something like squares and circles and triangles and all that good stuff. So, if we look right here, this is a geometric shape. We have square, triangle, circle. An organic shape could have lots of curvy areas, and it just is very random like this. Now, we also see this a lot with things that we see out in the world. For example, something like a leaf. So if we look at a little feather or a leaf, you see it's just a bunch of really jaggedy lines in a sort of teardrop shape. Doesn't necessarily fit into one of these categories. It's very curvy. It's not very straight and neat. So that's what we would consider an organic shape. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be something with nature. It could be anything from a hand to something super crazy like a light show at a stage. Right there is what we call organic shapes. So we're going to show how we can use shapes to help us draw really difficult things like animals. Now, one thing that people always ask me is, how do you get so good at drawing people and animals? And honestly, the best thing I can tell you is stop looking at this as a really complex thing like an animal. While this is my dog Polly, I am going to stop looking at it as my dog Polly, and instead I'm going to look at a whole bunch of shapes and lines. So, the best thing to do is we look at our picture and we start looking at what shapes we really see. So I see some circles, I see some triangles, and some different lines. And we're going to create what's called an underdrawing. An underdrawing is a very light sketch that we do underneath our finished drawing that starts to put everything in place and tell us where everything is going to go, but it's totally just shapes. So right here, we're going to start drawing the circle for her head. Again, the really big top part of her head is just a circle. Does it look exactly like it? No, but we'll go in later and add some more details to really make it look like her. So here we have one little area right here, and then it's almost like an ice cream cone, her head. It goes down not at a total point, but it kind of comes down this way. So I'm going to draw a little triangle this way. I'll go in later and I'll correct it to make it actually look like her mouth, but for right now it's just a triangle shape. Same thing with her ears. Her ears are very triangle-y. I'll go back in later and curve them up a little bit, but for my underdrawing, I'm just going to draw triangles. Her eyes are very circular, so I'll draw that. Her nose is kind of like a little gumdrop, so I'm going to do like a half circle for her nose. And then her mouth kind of is like how we would do like a smiley face smile. We do one on top, and then we do one on bottom to kind of make her mouth. And then for the body part, we don't look at shapes, we look at more lines. And so for the back, I'm just going to do a line this way, and a line down here, and then a line for her collar. Now you might look at this and be like, Mr. C, this does not look like your dog at all. This looks like some kind of weird shape ice cream cone demon. And I promise you, it's gonna look weird at first, but now that I know where everything is for the most part, I'm gonna go through and I'm going to fix it up. So I'm gonna use my pencil and I'm gonna start drawing a lot darker, and I'm going to look at just specific areas and draw what I see. So if you were watching last week's episode, you might notice it's a lot like when we drew our contour drawings and we were just focusing on the outline of shapes. This is going to be the exact same thing. So I'm not going to try to draw the whole thing all at once. I'm just going to do specific areas. Me personally, I always go for the hardest part first. Just get that out of the way. So for me, the hardest part is her mouth and nose area. So the nose, I'm going to fix it up. I'm going to make it a little curvier. I'm going to add some little nostrils for her, which are kind of like these little lines going in. And then I'm going to color it in a little bit, so that way I can differentiate it. And again, now I'm going to go to her mouth. I'm going to go over the lines that match pretty well, which the edge of her mouth right here matches pretty well. And then when we get to this part right here, if I look at the picture and follow with my pencil, it actually looks a little more like an upside down M. So it goes up, then goes in, then it goes back down, and then back up, like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly start erasing parts of the underdrawing that I don't want. Alright, and then I'm going to go down here. Again, I like this part for the most part, but I'm going to make the lip a little thicker, so I'm going to go over it a couple more times. And then her chin, again, is not very pointy, so I'm going to just curve it up at the bottom. Just make a little curvy half circle right here. And I can even add her bottom teeth, which are going to be these little candy corn shapes. Now notice when I'm starting to talk, I'm starting to relate the shapes to things that I know in real life. So when I say, oh, it looks like a gumdrop, it looks like a candy corn, it helps my brain so much more with drawing. And right here, that's a pretty good mouth. And I'm totally just taking my shapes and I'm breaking them down into more detail. So I'm going to speed up the process a little more, so that way you can see the final product. Pay special attention to how I'm going over the lines, erasing the underdrawing as I'm doing it, and just following with my eyes the lines that I see in the picture. Now, does this look exactly like Poly? Of course not, no. But the more I practice this, the better I'm going to get. And you can already see for my first time trying this out, it's not too bad. And you can always go back in and try out different techniques as well. Fix some areas that you think need to be fixed. But overall, you'll start noticing that the more that you focus on lines and shapes, the easier drawing is going to get. And that right there is a very basic way on how to draw animals. Now, we talked a lot about different kinds of shapes today, but no matter how different shapes may look, one thing they all have in common is that they're flat. So, when we're drawing shapes, anything that's two-dimensional or flat is what we call a shape. However, if it's three-dimensional, or if it looks like it's popping out at us, then it's no longer called a shape. We actually have a different word for that. Let's take a closer look at it. So, let's go back to our Cheez-Its. We already talked about how Cheez-Its look a lot like squares. And so if I was to draw this Cheez-It, I would just make a flat square, right? Pretty simple. But what about this? Now, a lot of you guys probably know what this is, and if not, thanks for making me feel old. It's a Rubik's Cube. Now, if I was to draw this Rubik's Cube, I could draw one side of it right here, but that doesn't really show us the whole cube. This is a three-dimensional object. It has multiple sides, it's got a lot of volume to it, and so this is no longer called a shape. This is what we would call a form. So again, if I was to draw it, I would want it to look more like it's popping out of my page rather than trying to draw it flat. Whereas the Cheez-It, I could probably do with it being flat. So anything that's flat and two-dimensional is a shape. Anything that is three-dimensional or looks like it's popping out at us, that's a form. And there you go. That's the difference between the two. Now in art, we can turn any shape, and just by adding a couple lines and a couple different sides, we can turn it into a form. So let's look at one of the easiest ways to do this. Here I have a little square. Let's say I want to turn this square into a cube. Now you can try to draw the cube at angles, but let me show you a little easier way. All you have to do is draw another square right next to it. Now half of this square is going to be inside the other square, and half of it's going to be out. So you see I'm drawing a line that goes half in, half out, half in, half out, and then the rest of it's out right here. And then all I have to do is match these points to each other using lines. So I'm going to match this point to this point, this point to this point, this point to this point, and this point to this point. It should match what we see. So this side should match with this side, and so on and so on. And then all I have to do is take my eraser and erase all the stuff inside that I don't want to see. And there you go. I have a little cube. Same thing you can use with a triangular prism. So if we want to draw a triangle, and then we want to draw a triangle outside, all we have to do is connect the points to the points that look exactly like it on the other triangle. Erase all the stuff that we don't want to see. And there you go. There's a triangular prism. Now some stuff is going to be a little harder. So for example, if I wanted to draw a cylinder, I would draw a really skinny oval and then another really skinny oval, almost like they're flat. And then I'm going to draw lines on each side. Erase the part I don't want to see. And there's a cylinder. If you want to draw a pyramid, we're going to draw a triangle, but we're going to pretend that the triangle is shifted a little bit. So it's going to have a diagonal line this way, a regular line this way, and then a more slanted line this way. And then all I have to do is draw another line going down this way, and another line going down this way, and there you go. Now, something like a circle, all we have to do to make it a sphere is use something that we've talked about a couple weeks ago, which is value. So if I add just a little bit of shading to this circle, you You see, I'm using the hatching method that we talked about not too long ago. There you go. It's suddenly a sphere. And you can make any of these shapes so much more interesting if you just add a little bit of shading to it. Suddenly, these are no longer shapes. They are fully formed forms. So I hope you guys learned a little bit more about shapes today and how you can use shapes to build yourselves up to be so much better artists. Now, like I said last week, this video will be coming up on this Monday, and so you guys will be getting a new packet on Thursday if you guys come to packet pickup, and those videos that will help you with whatever's in that packet will come up next Monday. And I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm sure it's going to be really interesting, whatever it is. But if you have any questions about the packet work, or if you just want to come talk to us, don't forget our office hours, which we have every day from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. And if not, you can always email me at xavier.corrales@wesdschools.org. Other than that, I hope you guys are doing well. Like I said last week, I really miss you guys, and I hope you guys are trying to stay creative during this. I know it's kind of a harder time, but I know you guys all are super creative and think outside the box all the time, so I know you guys are probably making something great, no matter what it is. Alright, until next time, peace out, Girl Scouts. We'll see you at the next video.